Today's show, we're going to talk about building your lower body, workouts that you can do to increase strength, increase hypertrophy, build some muscle, and do it all without equipment. Today, we're talking about lower body training and the most common lower body movements for building strength, the RDL, the good morning, and lunges. We're not going to talk about squats today, which is kind of like the granddaddy of them all. There's plenty of ways to use bands to do that, but most people don't have barbells in their houses right now. And if you don't have access to equipment, there's still plenty of ways to get super strong without going and spending all of your money on beautiful barbells, all these bumper plates. You just don't need it. All you really need to do is buy 1 or 2 bands, and we can start to create enough tension so that we're getting metabolic stress in the muscles, we're breaking down muscle tissue and having to rebuild it to increase hypertrophy, and then we're also adding external load, which is going to force the body to grow. Those are the 3 mechanisms of building strength, building muscle, and if we can do those, we don't always have to have the simplest tools. So bands turn out to be a really easy way. You can store them pretty much everywhere, and we're going to be able to create an immense amount of tension on the musculature so that we don't have to worry about having barbells and dumbbells, especially when gyms are closed and we need to be focused on a little bit easier space-saving ways to get strong. We also just launched our brand new bodyweight and bands hypertrophy program. So that's going to be down in the description. You should definitely check it out. If all you have at home is bands and you're looking to build muscle, get in the description. Bands and bodyweight hypertrophy program. Get on it. So building muscle without barbells, especially in your lower body, is going to be a little bit tricky. But here is how we can take pretty much any movement and turn it into a band strength building movement. So one of the very first ones that we can talk about is the RDL, right? So we can pick up a barbell. Everybody's done these. Push your hips back just below the knees. The legs stay straight. We squeeze our butt and we stand. Chest stays big. Abs are on, so we're stabilizing our spine. Everything's nice, right? We're building our glutes. We're getting a good stretch in our hamstring. Everything's in line. Weights on our midfoot. Now, when we come over to the band, it gives us a lot of opportunity because the more we stretch the band, the more tension we have on the band, the more muscle we're going to be built, right? So the further we're able to stretch this thing, the heavier it's going to get. That means at the bottom of the movement, when we're down here, it's going to be relatively light. There's no tension here yet. But as we stand and come up, that's going to be peak tension on the band. It's also going to be a great place for us to get an isometric contraction. So we're standing, recruiting as much musculature as possible in this position, and then we can come back down nice and slow, adding a good tempo. Legs stay straight, arms come down just below our knees. You can feel your glutes turn on, stretching the hamstrings straight back up. In the exact same way that we do the RDL with the barbell, you breathe into your belly, you stabilize your spine, your back's flat, your chest is up, and we stay in a good position and up. Adding a 3-second tempo on the way down is going to get us more time under tension. Stand up, isometric contraction at the top, squeezing our butt as much as possible, recruiting as many muscle fibers as we can back down. And because we're looking to get as much hypertrophy as possible, we're going to be in that 8 to 12 and on a super high end, 20 reps. Anything past 20, we don't really want to worry about. But depending upon the amount of tension that you're able to create in the band, that is going to be the amount of, or the total number of reps that you're able to get. So if you have a 1.5-inch band like this, you may not need to do all 20. 12 may be the sweet spot. But get to a point where there's almost 2 reps left in reserve. So you're going to go all the way to whatever a max would be, where your form starts to break down, and then 2 less than that, somewhere 3 sets at that number. Another really popular lower body core exercise, actually, but it gets deemed a lower body because we're hinging at the hips, so you're working on your glutes, is going to be the good morning. So that bar comes onto our back here in the exact same way that we're hinging in the RDL, except we're top loaded. So this is going to be a much better core exercise because the bar is going to get further out in front of us. It's going to be less in line with our midfoot. But the hips come back, we squeeze our butt, and we stand. Back and stand. And what you notice when we're at the top, that's actually the least amount of contraction that we're going to be getting in this movement. All of the contraction happens on the way down and up, all the muscle recruitment. One thing that's so great about the band is that while you're at the top is actually going to be at peak tension. So you're going to get a big isometric contraction at the top that you don't do with the barbell, which gives you the added opportunity to build muscle in that position. So to mimic that with the band, you want to put it over your shoulders, over your traps, create as much tension in the band as possible. If you want to do 2 bands in this position, awesome. It's about creating as much as possible without your form breaking down. So we push the hips back, a nice stretch in our hamstrings, and squeeze our butt on the way up. Down and up. Down, this is going to be the least amount of tension, and as we squeeze and the band stretches, peak tension at the top. 3-second isometric hold to get the most muscle recruitment, muscle fiber recruitment at the top. Now I want to talk about the third one, and this is one of my favorite lower body exercises actually, is the reverse lunge. And it's really tough with a band because to mimic this, just because it's in a funky spot, right? Like you don't really get the full tension because your legs are so strong when you get below parallel to be able to drive up. But we're able to do it, and I'm going to bring the bench in. But when we think about the reverse lunge, I'm a much bigger fan of a reverse lunge coming back and down. Here, we keep the knee over the toe and up. I enjoy that version much more than the step forward and then up, just because we get to stay off of our knees a little bit more. When the shin's more vertical, it seems to be a little bit easier on the joint. So the reverse lunge, we come back, down, stand. Our chest stays up. There isn't a huge hinge at the top, and back and down. It's all glutes and hamstrings. Now what we're going to do for the lunge is actually get a bench or maybe even a chair, depending upon what you have access to. Just like the good morning, it's going to go over our shoulders. That band goes right under our foot. And I really like the step-up version because we're able to load it very easily, get the band in place, we get our foot in a good place, the knee tracks right over the toes, and we're able to stand straight up. And that's going to be peak tension right there as we get to the top. Now, one thing you want to think about is lowering yourself as slow as possible. That's going to be where we're going to be able to get that good tempo work on the way down instead of just falling and springing back up. So we can go stand and then nice and slow on the way down. Stand, nice and slow on the way down. For all 3 of these movements, we want to be somewhere in the 8 to 12 reps. So if you get into the program in the description, bands and body weight, for hypertrophy, all of the rep ranges are going to be in that 8 to 12 range with the option to be able to kind of move them into higher rep ranges depending upon what bands you have in your house. So 8 to 12 is the perfect time under tension. If you want to think about it as like a RPE, or rate of perceived exertion, you're going to be somewhere in the max effort -2. That's going to be about an 8 on the RPE scale. And then from, say if your max effort is going to be 15, 17 reps, we're going to be in the 13 to 15 range. And that's going to be maximum hypertrophy, maximum load that we want to have on the musculature to activate everything. The negative is going to give us the time under tension that's going to tear the muscle apart, so we have to rebuild. And then the metabolic stress of having to do many reps over multiple minutes and controlled movements is always going to add more muscle. That's going to be that pump factor. So those 3 mechanisms that build muscle and how we use bands to do it without having barbells and dumbbells. Make sure you check out the link in the description to get the bands and bodyweight program we just launched today. And you can use the code SHRUGGED at checkout to save 10%. We'll see you guys next week.